I'm from a more enlightened age. The space age. From the future. The future of space.
There comes a time in every dork's life when we must set aside childish things and realise our once beloved film franchises have swung from consistently great to overly rubbish.
Watch me. I'll do the fingering.
For every 3 for 3 Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings or Before trilogy, there's an Alien, Jurassic Park or Superman series where the ratio of bad far outweighs the good. And that's where the convoluted Terminator timeline currently sits. 2 seminal movies, a sorely underrated TV show, and an extremely messy grab bag of also-rans that can't seem to make sense of their Cyberdynes, Skynets, and Sarah Connors.
It's about a killer robot driving instructor who travels back in time for some reason.
There are moments of brilliance buried throughout. The gutsy finale of Rise of the Machines, the overall T-800 arc of Dark Fate, the fact that Genesis ends. But what of the only entry to entirely skew the undetermined past for an ever-unfolding future built on decay, desperation, and exoskeletal dread? Well, let's just say my feelings towards Terminator Salvation have warmed from reflexive dislike to an opinion I feel strange uttering out loud. Folks, I think Terminator Salvation might be alright. Kind of. It's complicated. In the far-flung future of 2018, John Connor is confronted with an opportunity to end the apocalyptic reign of Skynet in one fell swoop. But when a stranger lost in time blurs the line between man and machine even further than it already is, both must unite to fight back against Oblivion. Let's start by showing some appreciation for the opening action sequence. This smash-and-grab recon mission gone awry moves from menacing quiet and snatched glances at human experimentation into devastating failure, and in doing so expertly establishes that humanity is well and truly on the back foot with matter-of-fact, unblinking brutality.
Data transfer complete! Connor, we're joining in Thompson!
Connor's desperate exfiltration attempt, captured in one continuous take, introduces this flawed, fatigued messianic figure by directly juxtaposing his weathered frame against the cruel destiny he's been dealt. The imagery of his past and future rendered as mushroom clouds and mechanized terror. Not too shabby for a typically terrible director who has parlayed an early career producing and writing for the band Sugar Ray into cultivating a filmography somewhere between Brett Ratner's Belly Button Lint and the Netflix slush pile. Aside from just layering on the biblical allusions that have been thickly slathered all over this metal frame since the original Terminator, it's also worth noting that this film is the first and only entry since Terminator 2 to understand and adhere to the core thematic tenet of this series.
The future's not set. There's no fate but what we make for ourselves.
The battle between the preordained and individual autonomy, the tug-of-war between the confines of determinism and the liberation of free will, it's what binds the time travel schlock with the tangible anxieties of a reality in which none of us knows what's coming next. While I appreciate the nihilistic fire of Terminator 3's closing moments, it outright reneges on the premise and promise of humanity posited by the preceding 2 films. Then Genesis and Dark Fate just double and triple down on the notion that, well, if we stop the Terminators, they'll just get right back to terminating, so this is all just a causality-defying circle jerk.
Goddamn time-traveling robots covering up their goddamn tracks. Knew it.
In Terminator Salvation, Connor is able to effect positive change to a timeline that keeps trying to skew towards destruction. Marcus Wright defies his reason for being, subverts the intentions of his creators, and gives life to a dying man and a dying land. They are making fate for themselves from the salted earth of fatalism.
You stay the course!
If we stay the course, we are dead! We are all dead!
With this being set in the post-apocalypse, one of the practical benefits from a creative and imaginative standpoint is that the Terminators no longer need to exist solely as infiltration units. Here they're prowling out in the open with a diversity of designs and sizes to suit their environmental purpose. Different utilitarian configurations of red dot eyes and grotesque chrome, custom built for this cold, dead place.
Okay.
Rather than soundtracking these aberrations with 80s synth sprawls or 90s orchestral excess, Salvation reflects its bleak setting by utilising ambience in place of a conventional score.
We'll send units to the extraction point. How many survivors are on site? Over.
1.
Copy.
Low winds and gravel, boot stomps and steel, a soundtrack largely reserved for the major action beats. This is a world of absence where emotional grandiosity and exciting encounters have been replaced with an unheroic, rugged nothingness. Another thing that's worth noting here is that, unlike every other entry in this franchise, rather than following the format of trying to offset some catastrophic destruction to come, the worst that can happen has happened. Connor and company are trying to better the here and now, to fight back against the awful fate in which they live. Within this future setting, we even get a few moments that recontextualize the existing canon in a way that adds appreciable layers to the past rather than eye-rolling retcons. Now on to a final point for which I think Terminator Salvation doesn't get enough credit and deserves far more commendations. For a 9-figure 21st century blockbuster bookended by this computer-generated cartoon and this dumb pixel barf, I was genuinely surprised to find just how much of this hellscape and its ash-coloured killbots were practically realised.
Pause it right there. You'll see on the ground Christian's body, but if you look more astutely and a little bit more closely, you'll see that that's a dummy.
The integration of tactile explosions and environmental details with tastefully used CGI sells the more fantastical physics-defying beats, whilst underscoring and reinforcing the thematic tension of this series. Real winning out over artificial, ragged imperfection versus clinical precision, human ingenuity versus digital hegemony. This pays off in the load-bearing moments of spectacle dotted throughout, be that the use of scale models for this Skynet explodification, the biggest real kaboom this side of Apocalypse Now, or the extended chase scene centerpiece that I'm willing to go out on a limb and declare the series' best action sequence since Terminator 2. Now, all of these positive points beg the question, if Terminator Salvation has so much going for it, then why isn't it an outright good movie? God damn it, McGee, you were so close, and you just couldn't cross the finish line without fucking it up.
Talk to the hand.
When talking about the ways in which Terminator Salvation falters, first we should look at some of the more superficial failings that stick in my craw whenever I revisit this rubble-strewn waste. There's the PG-13 rating that stifles the otherwise unrelenting harshness in a bloodless mire of watered-down brutality. Then we've got the desaturated grime and gunmetal grey palette of the image, which, while an effective if overdone visual shorthand for the bed's been shot on a global scale and colour no longer exists, I guess, doesn't make for a particularly memorable or visually engaging watch. As we've seen through the glimpses we've had of the future elsewhere in this franchise, you can absolutely keep the crushed skulls and despair of the apocalypse without eliminating the contrast, dynamism, and aesthetically engaging highlights when you're photographing it. Comparatively, if we examine the imperfect end of times we've already seen from this series, or would go on to witness after Salvation, they tend to blend midnight blues and plasma beams with the blown out oranges of erupting fires and flares cutting through the gloom. This just goes to show you can blend your Cormac McCarthy struggling survival with moonlit hues and vibrant compositional variety, without it taking away from the oppressive atmosphere. These unfavourable points of comparison between Salvation and the rest of the Terminator series actually extend beyond the cinematic releases. James Cameron did have an often forgotten third go-around with the T-800, with the seat-rumbling spectacle of the Terminator Battle Across Time immersive ride. Then there's Terminator Resistance's hiding, scrounging, edge of subsistence survival mechanics and stalking brutality of the roaming T-800s that make these machines genuinely scary in a way they haven't been since the first film. The same lack of depth and distinction that muddies up the look of Terminator Salvation also mires the tough, gruff, and empty writing. There is no heart, no hope, no personality, and no anchoring points of relatability to just about any of the characters here.
I didn't catch that last statement.
I'd like to ask, can you tell me anything whatsoever about the wants, needs, beliefs, personalities, or affectations of any of the supporting characters? Kate Connor is a person who is in scenes. Dr. Corgan has cancer and is then dead. The General gets grumpy, Williams likes Marcus Wright, and Barnes doesn't like Marcus Wright. Thus concludes everything you could ever say about 2/3 of the speaking cast.
So why are you still here?
As for Marcus Wright, who is essentially John Connor's odd couple biomechanical counterpart, there's so much thematically and narratively that could be done with a cognizant human trying to maintain his humanity within a T-800 frame, racked with regret whilst wrestling with where they fit into a world that has always rejected them, and Salvation pays lip service to some of these broader themes, but not much else. The expressive nuance and performative push and pull needed to emphasise and sell that kind of conflict is irreparably scuttled by Sam Worthington's all scowl and no sagacity delivery of every look and line.
You point a gun at someone, you better be ready to pull the trigger.
When the only thing you're known for more than your bad attempts at an American accent is your worse range as an actor, there's not a screenplay in existence that could wrench emotional depth from someone seemingly absent even the faintest acting ability.
The hell was that thing? Kyle Reese is on a transporter, heading for Skynet. What about the LA branch? I know what I am.
America!
I get it, Dad.
America! Australia!
Oh,
America!
that's
Australia!
enough.
America! Australia! America!
Oh! Here in America, we don't tolerate that kind of crap, sir!
Forgetting about this talking slab of mutton for a minute, there's actually a very simple explanation for these hollow shells that exist where characters belong. The originally intended screenplay for Terminator Salvation relied on small, bunker-bound character interactions and philosophical transhumanistic ruminations. These extensive and transformative rewrites to the bare-bones screenplay were meticulously woven in by Jonathan Nolan, and then the 2008 writers' strike and rules regarding WGA compliance meant that almost every word and added point of intellectual ideation had to go completely unused, though it is widely speculated that much of what was omitted would later be reappropriated for the brilliant first season of Nolan's Westworld.
These violent delights have violent ends.
This turn of events essentially meant that the production had to press forward with a leaky script that they'd fixed and then been forced to unfix, which leaves the unfinished final product with so many inconsistencies that it borders on irresponsible to release the film without addressing them.
We have destroyed ourselves.
Why does a sentient, self-aware AI build secure facilities with human amenities like keyboards, retinal scans, screens, and keypads?
Get your nose out of that, none of your business.
And if the Terminators are trying to eliminate John Connor by destroying Kyle Reese while he's still a child, why do they capture and then not kill him? Here, or where they're transporting him, or when he's a fish in a barrel right here? The answer is so the movie can happen. Seems as we're talking about the script, while it does allow for some of the striking visuals and stunning moments I've spoken of already, it is clearly a patchwork of that'll do ideas intended to move us between those eye-catching action beats. As such, just about every potentially resonant interaction is undercut by unnecessary dump trucks of exposition. For example, here we have an economic and brilliant line from John Connor.
You know me. We've been at war since before either of us even existed.
Then, instead of cutting away or lingering in the silence of that statement, he says this.
You tried killing my mother, Sarah Connor. You killed my father, Kyle Reese. You will not kill me.
A blunderbuss burst of blank-filling recapping that can only possibly serve to inform the 3% of viewers who opted to watch a third Terminator sequel whilst having no context or cultural understanding of what happened in any of the previous films. This condescending sloppiness based on the assumption of audience ignorance isn't even consistent, given the fan service cum compilation of references splattered everywhere else.
Come with me if you want to live.
Most egregiously is a final fight that takes the cynical approach of just making a weirdly stuffed turducken of the endings of Terminator 1, 2, and 3. Fighting in a factory against an exposed Terminator skeleton, the liquid metal and grenade launcher, the nuclear power cells and the Skynet R&D facility. It's not terrible, but it's just so strange for a film to spend the first 2 acts staking its own claim and doing something genuinely different, to take 10 steps backwards for the sake of sending the audience out of the cinema with a few crumbs of meaningless nostalgia. Then there's all that nonsense with John Connor getting a heart transplant from the Tin Man here and carrying on his merry way in an epilogue so lame that it feels like they just sharted it out at the last minute. Which is essentially what happened. For this rubbish ending, we need to thank Ain't It Cool News, a once taste-making mecca of nerds that became a hive of bigotry, sex weirdos, and hate-baiting regressive bullshit that would form the fandom blueprint for the critical drinking, oh no, not a woman or person of colour weirdos that would follow.
Very cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
You see, Ain't It Cool News effectively leaked all the Terminator Salvation screenplay details and threw their toys out of the pram because the original script saw John Connor killed in action, then turned into a Terminator by his allies so that he may continue to serve as an everlasting beacon for the Resistance, only for Skynet to trigger a malicious subroutine, forcing Connor to gun down his wife and comrades in the closing moments, thereby subverting the hero's journey and any messianic savior tropes in a bold and blood-curdling full stop. This made the internet very, very mad. So the studio hastily tossed the ending away in favour of something more palatable and generic to try and appease the same people who never shut the f*** up complaining about how movies are all the same and don't take risks, but never shut the f*** up about how they actually want sequels to be just the same and never take risks.
So you want a realistic, down-to-earth show that's completely off the wall and swarming with magic robots.
Ultimately, the cobbled-together, defanged ending we got is just another compromised cog in an already inefficient machine that can't seem to decide between forging forward with weight and purpose, or breaking down into a pile of nuts, bolts, and blown potential. Terminator Salvation is, to me, a textbook example of the kind of film I'm most fascinated by. An overhated, underrated, but admittedly unsuccessful mess of bold ambition, well-meaning execution, and face-palming mistakes. It's not a great film, and there are portions where it isn't even an okay film, but there is a fair amount of brilliance in the margins and underneath the rust that often gets dismissed for aggressive assertions that McG was the one to take a cloudy piss all over something important, and in doing so single-handedly consigned the franchise to the toilet of history. Which just isn't true whether you like the film or not. It's been over 3 decades since the last exemplary entry in this series. Perhaps we can cut some slack for a big film that understood the assignment, but flunked the final exam before getting kicked out of college for screaming at the cinematographer.
F***ing kick your f***ing ass. You don't shut up for a second, alright?
Can you believe I made it over 2,700 words into this without bringing that up?
Oh, good for you!
This film is a messy montage of standout sequences, technical skill, and expertly integrated practical effects, let down by a hacked-up screenplay and Sam Worthington's non-existent acting. Yes, we've seen better, but we've sure as hell seen a lot worse. And for that, and every other virtue I've sang for all y'all today, maybe we owe this particular Terminator just a little salvation. No fate for our Patreon producers Jennifer C, Claire MD, Becky O, Kay Krause, Jennifer Fetish, and Nicholas Slayer Revere, and a big metal skeleton for all these amazing folks who support us over on Patreon. So what do you make of Terminator Salvation? Let me know your best to worst ranking of the franchise, and as always the best way you can help us out is to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. If you're in a position to do so, consider checking out our Patreon at the link in the description below for access to our film club, our private Discord, and to get your name in the end credits. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, this is In Frame Out.